Salam sejahtera, anda bersama saya Nina Rozman dan ini Niaga AWANI. Kita mulakan dengan perkembangan pertama. Projek Bandar Wakaf Malaysia di Gaza yang bakal dilancarkan selepas Ramadan ini bakal menjadi model pertama pembangunan wakaf Malaysia di Palestin. Ia sekaligus memperlihatkan bukti solidariti negara terhadap rakyat Palestin melalui pembangunan dan ekonomi.
Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif Majlis Perundingan Pertubuhan Islam Malaysia MAPIM, Datuk Sani Arabi berkata, inisiatif ini tidak hanya bantuan kemanusiaan tetapi usaha mampan melibatkan solidariti rakyat Malaysia, pelbagai bangsa dan agama sekaligus mengukuhkan kedudukan Malaysia sebagai penyokong utama perjuangan Palestin di pentas antarabangsa. Beliau yang juga pengasas dan pengarah projek Bandar Wakaf Malaysia Gaza berkata, projek berimpak tinggi ini berada di bawah naungan Perdana Menteri Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim selaras dengan komitmen beliau sebagai peneraju ASEAN dalam memperjuangkan solidariti dan pembelaan terhadap rakyat Palestin. Pembangunan bandar wakaf ini bukan sekadar inisiatif bantuan tetapi model pembangunan wakaf pertama Malaysia di bumi Palestin yang boleh dijadikan contoh di peringkat global. Katanya ini adalah himpunan hati dan solidariti Malaysia merangkumi semua bangsa dan agama yang menjayakan untuk bina semula Gaza. Anwar pada Rabu memaklumkan Malaysia dan Jepun telah mencapai kesepakatan untuk menyegerakan usaha membina semula Gaza menerusi inisiatif Persidangan Kerjasama Negara Asia Timur untuk pembangunan Palestin dengan penumbuhkan dana khas bagi menyokong pembangunan semula wilayah terkesan. Selain itu, Perdana Menteri berkata Malaysia akan menggerakkan usaha membina sebuah sekolah, hospital dan masjid di Gaza bagi membantu meringankan penderitaan ditanggung penduduk Palestin dengan menggembling sinergi dan kerjasama semua pihak termasuk syarikat berkaitan kerajaan, badan bukan kerajaan NGO, swasta, perniagaan, korporat dan rakyat. Sani berkata keseluruhan anggaran untuk projek berkenaan kira-kira 120 juta ringgit meliputi pemberian tanah wakaf seluas 35.2 hektar yang telah dimeterai perjanjian dalam Gaza pada Februari 2023 dan pihak sekretariat telah pun menerima persetujuan wakaf bernilai 40 juta ringgit setakat ini. Projek itu melibatkan pembinaan 14 blok apartmen wakaf mewakili semua negeri dalam Malaysia, sebuah masjid berkembar dengan Masjid Shah Alam, sebuah sekolah Malaysia, taman rekreasi, 56 unit premis perniagaan di bawah program mikrokredit Kardul Hasan, sebuah klinik kesihatan serta menara tangki air menjadikannya satu ekosistem pembangunan lengkap dan mampan. Beliau berkata beberapa komponen utama dalam pembangunan bandar wakaf itu turut disumbangkan oleh pelbagai pihak termasuk Kerajaan Negeri Selangor, Negeri Sembilan, Terengganu, Kelantan, Melaka dan Pulau Pinang, Jabatan Kemajuan Islam Malaysia JAKIM, Yayasan Wakaf Malaysia YWM serta mendapat perkenan Sultan Selangor Sultan Sharafuddin Idris Shah yang menitahkan dan melancarkan tabung pembangunan Ihsan Selangor Gaza pada Mac tahun lepas. Dalam beritu, Sani memaklumkan MAPIM serta rakan sinergi Cinta Gaza Malaysia dan gagasan My Aqsa Defender berjaya membina 10 masjid di Gaza serta membantu membaik pulih semula hospital, sekolah, ruang ekonomi serta rumah yang menjadi antara pengalaman penting untuk kesinambungan projek ini.
Pada Isnin, harga saham gergasi chip Amerika Nvidia merosot mendadak kepada $117.26 Amerika, menandakan kejatuhan harian terbesar sejak Mac 2020. Pada masa sama, Rizab Persekutuan Amerika Syarikat mengekalkan kadar faedah pada 29 Januari lalu sekaligus dilihat menentang tekanan daripada Presiden Donald Trump untuk meneruskan pemotongan dalam keputusan kadar pertama sejak beliau kembali ke pejabat. Pengubal dasar mengundi sebulat suara untuk mengekalkan kadar pinjaman penada aras Fed pada antara 4.25% dan 4.5%. Adakah semua faktor luaran ini mempengaruhi Malaysia? Dan untuk ulasan lanjut, kita bersama Imran Yassin Mak Yusof merupakan Ketua MIDF Research. Saya nak ucapkan terima kasih. Imran, pertama sekali, mungkin boleh kongsikan bagaimanakah prestasi pasaran saham yang kurang memberangsangkan baru-baru ini? Apakah antara faktor-faktor atau pemacu utama yang mendorong prestasi tersebut?
Selamat pagi dan Assalamualaikum Nina. Jadi minggu ini sebelum pasaran saham ditutup pada hari Rabu dan Khamis untuk sambutan Tahun Baru Cina, FBM KLCI jatuh sebanyak 1.4% lah. Malah kalau kita lihat untuk tahun ini dah jatuh sebanyak 5.5%. Dan prestasi yang kurang memberangsangkan ini boleh dikatakan didorong oleh faktor luaran. Pertama, polisi Presiden Biden pada akhir pentadbiran beliau telah menyebabkan kegusaran di kalangan pelabur. Ini berkenaan dengan sekatan terhadap ekspor chip AI yang digunakan oleh pusat data atau data centers. Kemudian perasmian Presiden Donald Trump sebagai presiden buat kali kedua lagi sekali menyebabkan pelabur mengambil langkah berhati-hati kerana masih lagi tidak pasti dengan arah polisi beliau. Beliau tidak mengenakan tarif yang tinggi seperti yang dijanjikan, dan ini menaikkan sikit sentimen pelabur. Dan untuk minggu ini, pelabur banyak tertumpu pada pengumuman model AI DeepSeek daripada China yang menyebabkan pelabur bertanya mengenai pelaburan yang tinggi untuk AI. Ini adalah kerana model DeepSeek dikatakan dibangunkan dengan kos yang rendah dan tidak memerlukan chip yang terbaru. Ini menyebabkan pasaran saham berada pada trend yang tidak menentu dan pelabur mengambil langkah berjaga-jaga. Sektor teknologi lebih lagi di US menunjukkan prestasi yang buruk dengan pengembangan terkini, dan pelabur asing juga mengambil langkah untuk keluar daripada pasaran saham negara membangun seperti Malaysia, Thailand dan Indonesia dan sebagainya. Ini dapat lihat dengan prestasi pasaran saham serantau.
Seperti Imran, kita dapat rangkumkan bahawa kurang beransangkan disebabkan faktor luaran dengan iaitu sentimen pelabur dalam keadaan berhati-hati berwaspada menunggu apakah antara polisi yang akan dilaksanakan oleh Donald Trump untuk penggal kedua dan melihat kepada chip Nvidia dan juga iaitu pertumbuhan DeepSeek ketika ini dan beralih kepada keputusan US Fed untuk mengekalkan kadar pinjaman mereka pada minggu ini. Apakah yang Imran boleh rumuskan dan apa antara pandangan terhadap impak daripada keputusan ini?
Kita lihat pengurusi US Fed menyatakan pasaran buruh di Amerika Syarikat telah stabil dan kekal utuh, tetapi kadar inflasi masih lagi pada paras yang tinggi. Jadi ini menyebabkan pihak US Fed untuk tidak menurunkan kadar pinjaman mereka. Kami berpendapat terdapat kebimbangan jika diturunkan kadar pinjaman, maka inflasi mungkin akan melonjak kembali. Dan pasaran saham US bertindak secara negatif walaupun sudah dijangkakan bahawa US Fed tidak akan menurunkan kadar pinjaman mereka. Tapi kami berpendapat ini cuma impak jangka masa pendek. Apa yang penting ialah unjuran untuk tahun ini. Kami dan pasaran menjangkakan ada satu pemotongan, tapi amat sukar untuk membuat jangkaan yang konkret buat masa kini. Malah pihak US Fed juga menyatakan bahawa mereka perlu lihat polisi-polisi oleh Presiden Donald Trump dan impaknya terhadap ekonomi Amerika Syarikat untuk memberikan jangkaan apakah tindakan mereka selanjutnya.
Dan sekiranya US Fed kita lihat mengekalkan kadar faedah tersebut, bagaimana ini akan memberi kesan kepada kecairan pasaran dan pelaburan di Malaysia? Adakah ini menandakan ekonomi Amerika Syarikat ketika ini masih dalam keadaan tidak stabil, Imran?
Tidak, ia menunjukkan bahawa ekonomi di Amerika Syarikat amat teguh buat masa ini, sebab tu mereka tidak menaikkan atau menurunkan kadar pinjaman mereka kerana mereka tidak memerlukan. Pasaran buruh seperti saya cakap tadi stabil, inflasi juga agak tinggi tapi pada trend menurun. Jadi ini membuatkan pihak US Fed tidak memerlukan untuk memotong kadar pinjaman mereka. Tetapi of course impaknya akan dirasakan di pasaran saham negara membangun, di mana pelabur-pelabur asing mungkin akan lebih fokus kepada pasaran saham di Amerika Syarikat.
Dan bagaimana Imran menjangkakan prestasi pasaran saham pada masa terdekat ini pula?
Jadi kami menjangkakan pasaran saham tempatan sedang mengalami keadaan yang tidak menentu. Ini disebabkan faktor luaran seperti yang kami bincangkan. Mungkin setengah polisi akan dilihat memberi impak negatif kepada syarikat-syarikat selain daripada Amerika Syarikat, dan ia akan memberi tekanan kepada pasaran lain termasuk Malaysia. Jadi kita mungkin akan berdepan dengan paras Kaoosji yang berlega sekitar 1550 hingga 1565 dalam masa terdekat ini. Ini disebabkan keadaan yang tidak menentu, sentimen pelabur yang tidak menentu juga. Namun begitu kita masih lagi positif untuk tahun ini. Kami menjangkakan Kaoosji akan tutup lebih tinggi tahun ini, dan ini akan didorong oleh pemotongan kadar pinjaman oleh US Fed yang kami jangkakan mungkin akan dilakukan pada pertengahan tahun ini.
Itu yang kami dapat rangkumkan bahawa prestasi dalam tempoh terdekat ini berada dalam keadaan tidak menentu pasaran, termasuk juga dengan sentimen pergerakan Bursa Malaysia, dan memandangkan prestasi pasaran saham didorong seperti Imran kata oleh faktor luaran. Apakah pendapat Imran yang perlu dibuat ataupun dilakukan oleh pelabur pada masa ini?
Jadi untuk pelabur mungkin adalah disyorkan untuk mengurangkan risiko pelaburan. Jadi kami mensyorkan pelabur melihat pada sektor defensif dan sektor-sektor yang banyak bertumbuh pada faktor-faktor domestik. Ini bermaksud kita lihat sektor yang punya pendapatan yang stabil dan memberikan dividen kepada pelabur. Dan dividen ini bukan saja mengurangkan risiko pelaburan, ia memberi sedikit pulangan. Jadi pelabur boleh lihat pada sektor perbankan di mana dividen yield sebanyak 4 hingga 6% atau sektor REIT umpamanya, dan juga boleh lihat syarikat yang bersifat defensif seperti tenaga, utilities dan sebagainya.
Imran, mungkin boleh kongsikan akhir sekali untuk kita lihat dengan risiko pasaran global yang kita boleh cakap semakin tinggi ataupun semakin tidak menentu, apakah antara strategi pelaburan defensif yang lebih sesuai dalam tempoh jangka panjang pula?
Untuk jangka panjang, kami juga sama seperti yang kami cakap tadi, because dengan pelaburan defensif ini, dia ada memberikan dividen. Jadi daripada segi dividen itu mengurangkan, memberi pulangan kepada pelabur walaupun pada di masa pasaran saham yang tidak menentu. Jadi untuk jangka pendek ini mungkin boleh lihat kepada beberapa sektor yang mungkin tidak mungkin akan ada possibility untuk menaik semula, seperti sektor construction, tetapi secara jangka panjangnya kami mensyorkan untuk lihat pada sektor defensif seperti perbankan dan REIT dan sebagainya.
Seperti Imran kongsikan, walaupun kita lihat dalam tempoh sebelum ini pasaran berada dalam keadaan yang kurang berangsangkan disebabkan oleh faktor luaran, dan dalam tempoh terdekat pasaran dan sentimen dijaga dalam keadaan tidak menentu dan berhati-hati, berwaspada, namun pelabur disyorkan untuk melihat kepada sektor-sektor yang lebih defensif yang dapat mengukuhkan daripada segi dividen yang kukuh untuk memberi mereka iaitu daya saing yang lebih tinggi dalam keadaan yang tidak menentu ini. Sekali lagi saya nak ucapkan terima kasih kepada Imran Yasir Mat Yusof, merupakan Ketua MIDF Research, dan setiap perbincangan ini akan kami rangkumkan dalam astroawani.com dan di semua platform digital Astro Awani. ASEAN mahu berunding dengan Amerika Syarikat dalam bidang pelaburan dan perdagangan secara kolaboratif. Fellow Kanan Program Dasar Luar Negeri dan Kajian Keselamatan ISIS Malaysia, Thomas Daniel berkata, usaha sama ini perlu diteruskan walaupun persepsi umum mengenai rundingan dengan pentadbiran Donald Trump dianggap sukar.
Americans. Southeast Asia, does not really want the Americans to disengage. What we want is a more collaborative, sort of a much more collaborative engagement that is not just predicated on a security lens or predicated on a lens of containing this power or that power.
Tambah Thomas, sikap negara-negara ASEAN ini adalah berdasarkan kepada angka pelaburan yang tinggi oleh Amerika Syarikat di rantau Asia Tenggara. Menurutnya, sumbangan Amerika Syarikat kepada rantau ini juga menjangkaui aspek keselamatan dan pembangunan.
But the Americans have invested heavily in Southeast Asia. 2 years ago, a cumulative American investment in Southeast Asia outnumbered their investment in China, Japan, Korea, India put together. Right? A lot of Southeast Asian countries, including countries that are very critical of the United States, depend hugely on security cooperation and partnership with the Americans.
Beliau berkata demikian dalam program Dialog ASEAN 25 pada Khamis.
ASEAN tidak boleh terjebak dalam persaingan Amerika Syarikat dan China yang bukan lagi bersifat pertembungan dagang. Profesor Ekonomi Lee Ka-seng dan Dekan Institut Dasar Awam Lee Kuan Yew, Universiti Kebangsaan Singapura, Profesor Danny Kwah berkata, ASEAN perlu membawa naratif pembangunan tersendiri yang tidak menjurus kepada perspektif bersaing dan konfrontasi.
America feels that China's rise will continue to advance the emergence of a hostile hegemon whose ascendancy will sharply constrain America's freedom of actions in this region. That's a story that's got nothing to do with trade. It's about great power competition. We in ASEAN need to establish a narrative for ourselves that takes us out of that. And if we can actually try and help the two understand each other better, so they no longer view each other in that confrontational way.
Beliau berkata demikian dalam program Dialog ASEAN 25 pada Khamis. Pada 25 Januari lalu, Presiden Amerika Syarikat Donald Trump mengancam China dengan tarif tinggi sejurus selepas memenangi pilihan raya. Langkah itu akan menambah beban terhadap ekonomi China yang sudah pun terjejas, memandangkan Amerika adalah pasaran ekspor paling penting bagi negara tersebut. Dalam perkembangan berasingan pada Isnin lalu, prestasi platform kecerdasan buatan AI DeepSeek yang mampu menyaingi peneraju industri seperti Google dan OpenAI menjejaskan pasaran saham syarikat teknologi utama, terutamanya dalam sektor semikonduktor. Kedua-dua senario ini menonjolkan persaingan antara kedua-dua negara.
Malaysia, a nation of promise and progress, proudly steps into the ASEAN Chairmanship in 2025. A decade ago, we held the chair as the ASEAN community was born in Kuala Lumpur. And now, Malaysia is once again ready to drive progress and empower the people of Southeast Asia. ASEAN is now more than an association of nations. It is a symphony of shared dreams, the chorus of hopes intertwined. It breathes with the rhythm of unity, with a vision that lights the path to a brighter tomorrow. Together we have forged a path towards peace, stability, and prosperity. Through the trials and triumphs, ASEAN has grown even stronger. Today, we stand as an economic powerhouse, poised to become the world's fourth largest economy. Our resilience is unshakable, our resolve unwavering. In 2025, we will forge ahead, bold, confident, and unyielding. This is ASEAN's moment to shine. As chair, Malaysia will embrace the future with a clear vision. We will champion inclusivity, creating a region where every voice soars and no one is left behind. We will drive sustainability in all we do, securing the long-term well-being of our people. Together, we will build a future where everyone can thrive.
ASEAN is a community of nations, of shared dreams, an excellent example of how neighbors can sit down and work together for the betterment of our people.
In 2025, under the guiding light of the ASEAN Community Vision 2045, a new chapter will begin. This marks the start of a 20-year journey. A journey where we rise not as separate nations, but as one. One community, bound by progress, peace, and purpose. One vision, driven by the promise of a greater future for generations to come. Together, we will shape a future of shared peace, stability, and prosperity, where our unity drives us forward and our legacy endures. Welcome to where it all begins anew.
Selamat datang, welcome to Malaysia.
Toyota Motor Corporation mengekalkan gelaran sebagai pengeluar kereta terbesar dunia berdasarkan jumlah jualan untuk tahun kelima berturut-turut pada 2024. Menurut data yang dikeluarkan pada Khamis, ia didorong oleh permintaan kukuh bagi kenderaan hybrid.
Menurut agensi berita Kyodo, kumpulan automotif itu yang merangkumi pengeluar kenderaan Mini Daihatsu Motor Corporated dan pengeluar truk Hino Motors Limited merekodkan jualan sebanyak 10.82 juta unit pada 2024, susut 3.7% berbanding tahun sebelumnya. Pesaing utama Toyota, Volkswagen AG dari Jerman, menjual 9.03 juta kereta sepanjang tahun berkenaan. Toyota sendiri mencatatkan jualan sebanyak 10.16 juta kereta, merosot 1.4% selepas terjejas akibat skandal pensijilan kenderaan di Jepun yang menyaksikan syarikat itu menghentikan sementara pengeluaran beberapa model. Jualan domestik merosot 13.8% kepada 1.44 juta unit. Mengikut rantau, jualan Toyota di Amerika Utara meningkat 4.3% kepada 2.73 juta unit. manakala jualan di Eropah naik 3.6% kepada 1.17 juta unit, didorong oleh permintaan tinggi terhadap model seperti RAV4 dan CHR. Bagaimanapun, jualan di China susut 6.9% kepada 1.78 juta unit berikutan persaingan harga yang sengit. Jualan kenderaan hybrid meningkat 21.1% kepada 4.14 juta unit, disokong oleh permintaan yang kukuh di pasaran utama seperti Amerika Utara dan Eropah ketika permintaan global terhadap kenderaan elektrik mula menunjukkan tanda-tanda kelembapan. Sementara itu, jualan kenderaan elektrik Toyota meningkat 34.5% kepada 139,892 unit. Pengeluaran global kumpulan itu susut 7.8% kepada 10.62 juta kenderaan, dengan pengeluaran Toyota sendiri merosot 5.1% kepada 9.52 juta kereta. Toyota menghentikan pengeluaran beberapa model popular termasuk Yaris Cross susulan skandal yang mendedahkan syarikat itu tidak mematuhi sepenuhnya piawaian kerajaan dalam ujian kenderaan.
Kelewatan dalam menyambung semula perkhidmatan aerotrain di lapangan terbang antarabangsa Kuala Lumpur KLIA pada asalnya dijadualkan pada Januari 2025 dilihat sebagai mengecewakan selepas lebih 2 tahun menantikannya. Pakar ekonomi dalam bidang penerbangan dan aeroakansa di Institut Teknologi Penerbangan Malaysia MIAT Universiti Kuala Lumpur, Profesor Madya Muhammad Haridun Muhammad Sufian berkata, penjadualan semula ini boleh memberi impak negatif kepada persepsi terhadap KLIA.
Aerotrain yang menjadi kaedah pengangkutan penting antara terminal lapangan terbang telah digantung operasinya pada Mac 2023 untuk kerja-kerja penyelenggaraan dan menaik taraf selepas mengalami kerosakan dengan janji awal untuk memulihkan perkhidmatan tersebut mengikut garis masa ditetapkan pada tahun baharu. Perkhidmatan itu yang telah beroperasi selama 25 tahun telah menjadi teras kepada rangkaian pengangkutan dalaman KLIA sejak 1998. Beliau berkata kelewatan tersebut boleh memberi impak kepada ekosistem penerbangan berikutan penurunan yang ketara dalam nilai keyakinan boleh menjejaskan daya maju ekonomi. Jumaat lepas, Malaysia Airports Holdings Berhad MAHB mengumumkan bahawa perkhidmatan aerotrain akan kembali beroperasi sepenuhnya pada suku kedua 2025 dan kelewatan itu tidak akan menjejaskan peranan Malaysia sebagai pengerusi ASEAN. Pada taklimat sama, pengarah urusan MAHB Datuk Muhammad Izani Ghani berkata garis masa asal adalah sasaran yang terlalu tinggi. Muhammad Haridun menekankan bahawa dalam mana-mana projek perlu ada usaha wajar yang menyeluruh semasa menetapkan pencapaian dan garis masa untuk memastikan ujuran tarikh akhir yang disasarkan realistik dan saksama mengikut kos yang dipersetujui. Bagaimanapun, di sebalik keterujaan dan jangkaan yang meningkat dalam kalangan penumpang, MAHB berkata pembukaan semula perkhidmatan aerotrain telah ditangguhkan kerana keperluan untuk langkah-langkah keselamatan tambahan dan penilaian teknikal. Walaupun penangguhan itu telah menyebabkan kesulitan, ia adalah keputusan yang mencerminkan komitmen pengendali lapangan terbang tersebut untuk mengutamakan keselamatan berbanding memenuhi tarikh akhir yang ketat secara tergesa-gesa. Dalam perkara ini, Muhammad Haridun memuji MAHB kerana menangani isu tersebut secara proaktif dengan menamatkan kontrak pihak tertentu yang gagal memenuhi pakej kerja yang dipersetujui. Sehubungan itu, MAHB terus telah menyampaikan bahawa penangguhan itu perlu untuk melengkapkan kerja-kerja menaik taraf tambahan dan ujian menyeluruh untuk memastikan sistem aerotrain memenuhi piawaian keselamatan yang diperlukan.
Hi, you are watching special coverage, Decoding World Economic Forum 2025 with me, Ashwat Ismail and Najib Aroff, here from Oxford. We are going to decode all of those that have spoken by world leaders, corporate leaders, as well as civil society organizations in World Economic Forum 2025. I think most important, we'll break into several areas. Number one, most important, that took the center stage, ASEAN. Second, artificial intelligence and challenges ahead and what's coming. That is most important for us as society as well as businesses.
And also, I'm going to touch about Trump 2.0 is one of the main focus at World Economic Forum. And of course, when you talk about ASEAN, when we talk about World Economic Forum, it's always a Eurocentric forum. We always discuss about how do developed countries manage the world problems, and also with the help of the developing countries as well. But at the same time, this year, with the Malaysia as the chairman of ASEAN, ASEAN took a center stage at the discussion, extensive discussion at World Economic Forum in terms of ASEAN. And naturally, we expect a lot of questions about ASEAN in terms of the Western countries and then Euro countries understanding ASEAN as a whole. And Prime Minister Dr. Ibrahim has mentioned about and also being asked about whether ASEAN will become the EU 2.0. Let's listen to what Prime Minister has to say.
Intra-ASEAN trade. Yeah. And work together to complement one another. So that is comparative advantage. So the economic fundamentals in terms of trade, investments, to me is important, and the way we negotiate with the other countries or regions. But whether we want to then emerge to become like EU is something that we have not explored. Our advantage is to study EU, the successes and the limitations, and we are not too concerned about the political setup. We are more concerned about the economic collaboration. Yeah.
Now, we understand the difference between ASEAN and also European Union in terms of the collaboration of economy. The ASEAN focus on the fostering collaboration of economy, while the EU involve political aspect as well. That's the difference between ASEAN and EU. And then this is the understanding of ASEAN is more clearer.
I think the message from ASEAN leaders were very clear. There are three key components in this. Number one, I think it will go on to impartial and adaptive strategy or adaptive approach, in which the question here, are we the bridge between the two big brothers, China and United States of America under President Trump? Yeah. And second, ASEAN is an attractive investment bloc. And given the fact that Asian trade is expected to rise to $7 trillion by 2030, of course, we are set to be the fourth largest economy in the world. And let's hear on one piece of advice from Chief Advisor of Bangladesh government, Dr. Muhammad Yunus. Among others, I would take out one particular pertinent point in which we cannot build ASEAN based on the old footsteps of others. So we need to find our own uniqueness, find our own way, and thinking about how to rewrite development for this particular region of ASEAN.
What kind of future that we see for ourselves as a region, as a country? We follow the same footsteps that the West has done as a success, and the same development paradigm that we have learned. And I'm always saying, no, that's not the way we should do. We should create our own way of what we see as a development, as a future of our countries, and so on. One of the things we said, all the issues and definitions and the concepts that we have adopted from the Western way of looking at it, can be redesigned. And that's one of the things is the whole banking system, whether banking system should remain connected with the people with money. Can it be redesigned to bring it to people who don't have money, starting with that? And that's what the changes in the microcredit came as a change for that, addressing that, challenging the whole banking system. Banking system has to be redesigned. And that led to us another issue which we want to share with ASEAN as a part of ASEAN, we will have to work together to make a different kind of society that we have right now, following the same kind of old footsteps that we do. Avoid the whole wealth concentration issue completely, right from the beginning. Because otherwise, if you follow the same step, we go back to the same thing with all the concentration of wealth.
Okay, speaking of ASEAN, Najib,
Yes.
I think regional integration holds a lot of promises, and in this case, we cannot run away from two things. Number one is artificial intelligence, number two is digitalization. And coming from Singapore, of course, our biggest focus would be DEFA, Digital Economic Framework Agreement, because DEFA and trade, these are two important elements for this particular region to grow even further.
Yeah.
Let's hear from the Deputy Prime Minister of Singapore.
Connectivity also relates to free trade agreements, the arrangements that we have with our neighbours, ASEAN, and with the rest of the world. Singapore has 27 free trade agreements with different parts of the world. We cover more than 90% of the world's GDP. So that is very important. But lastly, I think that we touched on just now, and that's digital connectivity. So in addition to physical connectivity and free trade agreements, we also need to be able to digitally connect up with our key trading partners. That is harder to do because it's both ends of the digital connectivity. Not just Singapore, but our destination, our intermediate points also have to be digitalized. So I think this is something that is a work in progress. We continue to work with our partners to develop and enhance their digital capability. And that's why we have the ASEAN Digital Economy Framework Agreement to help the whole of ASEAN level up their digital capability.
Okay, now this is a real thing, and everyone is trumpeting about, which is President Donald Trump. And I guess his session with corporate leaders, top CEOs, says everything about the way forward for United States of America.
Now, of course, Trump mentioned a lot of things about the unfairness in terms of world trade between US and also European Union. He mentioned about how this has to change, but at the same time, it has received the reaction from the Christine Lagarde, the president of European Central Bank. That's going to be played later. But let's listen to what Trump had said about the unfairness between the trade relation US and also European Union.
Hundreds of billions of dollars of deficits with the EU, and nobody's happy with it, and we're going to do something about it, but nobody's happy with it. So I think the EU has to speed up their process. Friends of mine that are in some of the nations within the EU, great people, they want to be able to compete better, and you can't compete when you can't go through the approval process fast. There's no reason why it can't go faster. So, you know, I'm trying to be constructive because I love Europe. I love the countries of Europe, but the process is a very cumbersome one. And they do treat the United States of America very, very unfairly with the VAT taxes and all of the other taxes they impose.
Security of supplies of
And of course, Trump mentioned about the relationship between US and also Saudi Arabia in terms of investment. We know that Saudi Arabia announced about a $600 billion investment into the US, but Donald Trump asked the number to be increased, to be rounded up to $1 trillion.
Okay, this is the best part. The critic somehow, I think the critic to Donald Trump definitely would say this is the era of pay Trump era. But somehow we need to connect with how Donald Trump is going to, in terms of his new style of leadership that the world leaders need to play along with. So let's hear, in terms of investment, I think this is a very important element, and how to make sure to look into so-called the stability in the Middle East, because you cannot run away from what Trump has said. He wants to be the unifier as well as the peacemaker.
And it's also reported today in the papers that Saudi Arabia will be investing at least $600 billion in America, but I'll be asking the Crown Prince, who's a fantastic guy, to round it out to around $1 trillion. I think they'll do that because we've been very good to them. And I'm also going to ask Saudi Arabia and OPEC to bring down the cost of oil. You got to bring it down, which frankly, I'm surprised they didn't do before the election. That didn't show a lot of love. by them not doing it. I was a little surprised by that. If the price came down, the Russia-Ukraine war would end immediately. Right now, the price is high enough that that war will continue. You got to bring down the oil price. You got to end that war. They should have done it long ago. They're very responsible, actually, to a certain extent, for what's taking place. Millions of lives are being lost.
And of course, we have direction from the president of ECB, European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, and also the president of Singapore, Mr. Tharman, where basically Christine has said that the unfairness between US and EU need to have a proper discussion and also diplomacy discussion in terms of that. At the same time, she somewhat criticized the way Trump had said about the unfairness between US and also EU, where she said that this is not a direct conversation and direct deal. It involves a lot of things and a lot of structural changes in terms of both relationship, EU and also US. Let's listen to what she has said about the relationship, and also at the same time how Singaporean president views the trust deficit and erosion in the world.
What is true is that there has to be negotiations. There has to be trade relationships that are organized in a framework that is giving confidence to the partners. It cannot be about, removing all the rules, ignoring the institutions. The world has, 190 plus countries that are members of the IMF, the World Bank, the WTO, 191. And it's about all of us operating together, as Tharman said earlier on. So, yes, you sit at the table, yes, you negotiate, yes, some countries are in a stronger position than others, but we all need each other. If there is one thing that the Europeans have learned over the course of time since the end of the Second World War, is that you cannot go alone. You have to work together. You have to respect each other's.
We have to avoid moving in a gradual, grinding way towards fragmentation and towards some breaking up of the world into blocks. It's a real risk. So what do we do using all the agency we have? The middle powers, India, ASEAN, Europe, Japan, the international institutions. What do we do in between those two extremes? Between the unattainable ideal of prosperity being indivisible and avoiding at all cost a zero-sum world. There's a lot we can do. There's a lot that we can do. But start from the reality that there are strengths in each of our nations, very well described. The US has a unique set of markets and institutions that drives innovation in a way that no other nation or region does. And as Christine says, Europe has human capital, and I mean it not just in terms of expertise, but in terms of values. It's a font of the values that we admire in today's world. Asia has a desire to keep opening up, to keep breaking barriers. Asia is still striking FTA deals. And we now have the UK joining the CPTPP, and there's several others on the waiting list. So build on these strengths.
Okay, speaking of Donald Trump, Najib, I think the next two analysts, the soundbites from the next two analysts, is very important to see how are we going to navigate between the rivalry of China and US. So, of course, on top of that, we are trying to navigate the way forward for this particular situation. Whether the two big brothers is going to go into very intense competition or otherwise. And let's hear from these two particular analysts.
Well, anybody whose crystal ball is clear probably hasn't understood the problem, so it's hazy. But I would say if you try to take Trump seriously, but not literally, and you take the time to watch his antics and watch the rallies and watch the tweets and read between the lines, you can get some pretty good clues about what's likely to happen. So I would predict that 6 months from now, the Ukraine war will be over. You asked about China. I think China would be part of the deal. I think that it'll settle roughly at the current line of division, which is where it will have settled a year ago or the year ago or the year ago. Trump's repeated line about this is endless, useless killing. Each year, Ukraine is in a worse position than it was the year before. This is set for a deal if there were a deal maker. And he's looking at it, and I think that's what will, I would suspect that'll be a big piece of it. Indeed, if you look at his inaugural speech and the press conference, he wants to be not only a deal maker, but an international deal maker who's a peacemaker.
But I do think the U.S.-China relationship is probably the one that is most problematic to get a deal. I think that we are heading towards a trade war and towards a more strategic decoupling of the economies. One reason for that is because Trump isn't just focusing on tariffs on China, but he's also focusing on third countries where there are pass-throughs to the U.S. The only way the Chinese economy is succeeding right now is through their $1 trillion export surplus. And so you see Trump and his team focusing a lot on Mexico and India and Vietnam. The other conversations they're having bilaterally, one of the top priorities is squeeze China coming in. That's very hard for China to respond to. You've already seen Sheinbaum in Mexico. That's been her top priority. Before she even meets with them, we've got a Mexico plan that is going to take the Chinese out, right? So I think that makes it much harder. And I also think China's complicated. And Graham knows this well. I mean, the only reason we've stabilized U.S.-China relations in the last year and a half is because there are 25 high-level cabinet-to-cabinet bilats channels that have been set up. There's an enormous amount of effort put into the relationship. So I agree with Allison that Trump has an orientation to meet with Xi and have a good meeting and, you know, flatter him a little bit and say, come on, let's get to a deal. But getting to a deal with China will require a level of execution, implementation that's far more complicated across the Trump administration. Not to mention some support from the GOP and Congress. We're nowhere close to that. So I actually think that in the coming months, we are heading to a dramatic shift.
Okay, now we don't know what's coming with regards to artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence, AGI. And this is the most important part. I think AI has improved a lot up to the point that going to beat human beings, so-called. This is the premise of argument saying that, you know, on the IQ side, AI has developed one of the best so-called technological advancements at this point in time. But how far AI has to be regulated, these remain questions, and it varies from one region to another.
Yeah, this is really interesting because in one of these sessions, they were discussing about AGI, artificial general intelligence, and this AGI will mimic the human as close as possible in terms of having EQ as well. But at the same time, we understand that even the company of AI who owns AI technology and all that, they don't really have the absolute answer on how to control AI. At the same time, we have the academician side during the same panel who actually looking at the risk and also how do we manage this in terms of the rapid development of AI. Let's listen to what the owner of the company of AI has said about AI development and also what the academician said about the risk of losing control of AI advancement.
I've become probably in the last 3 to 6 months more confident that we really are heading towards AI systems that are better than almost all humans at almost all tasks. My guess, and I'm still not certain of it, but I think with some of the things we've seen with models starting to be as good as PhD students in areas like math and programming and biology, it is my guess that by 2026 or 2027, we will have AI systems that are broadly better than almost all humans at almost all things. The way we're not used to thinking about things is, what if we have millions of copies, I called it a country of geniuses in a data center, of agents that are better than humans at everything? What limits? Do we just immediately solve all of the world's problems? I don't think that happens. For example, self-driving cars are difficult. So I think we're going to be limited by the physical world, by deployment cycles, and often by laws. If we take the pharma case as an example, we still need to run clinical trials. There's still physics and biology, But I think the AI systems will get better at things that used to be late-stage clinical trials can become early-stage clinical trials. Things that used to be early-stage clinical trials can be done in vitro. Things that can increasingly be simulated. So I do think there will be a great acceleration. If I had to guess, and this is not a very exact science, my guess is that we can make 100 years of progress in areas like biology in 5 or 10 years if we really get this AI stuff right.
When people talk about AI being dangerous, I think it sounds a lot like talk about your laptop computer being dangerous. Absolutely, your laptop can be dangerous because someone can use your laptop to do awful things, just like someone could use AI to do awful things. We should pass laws to stop them. So that's how I tend to view AI. There's an alternative view of AI, which is not mine, which I think is if AI is this sentient alien being with its own wants and desires, it could go rogue. In my experience, my AI sometimes does bad things. I just program it to stop doing that, and I can't control it perfectly, but every year, our ability to control AI is improving.
Indeed, we are on a path where we're going to build machines that are more than tools, that have their own agency and their own goals, and that is not good. And you're saying it's okay, we're going to find ways to control them. But how do you know? Like right now, science doesn't know how we can control machines that are even at our level of intelligence, and even worse if they're smarter than us. Nobody knows. And what we find in the behavior of AI that exists today, but presumably even worse when they are smarter, is that they also find loopholes. When you have contrary objective, like make a lot of money and respect the laws, well, you find a way to interpret the instructions about what's moral in a way that favors some other objective. And it's exactly the same thing that is happening with AI. So I think it is a fundamental problem. It is we need democratic process to try to clarify what we want from AI.
One is that because we don't know, we need more investment on scientific understanding about Gen AI. The fact that we know how to create that doesn't mean that we actually understand it. The fact that you can give life to humans doesn't mean that we actually understand how the body actually works or mental health works. We still have a lot to find out. Similarly, the fact that we know how to create Gen AI doesn't mean that we know how to control it or we know how things work. We do not know the limits of it. I wish that things progress slowly, personally, even though I'm very much in the middle of it and excited about it. But I wish it goes slow, but it's not going to go slow. It's only going to go faster. In that case, what can we possibly do? I think we need to invest more into the efforts of making human lives better using AI, as opposed to just making AI better for itself. And what I mean by that is try to address really hard questions that humanity faces. Like, it could even include how do we deal with natural disasters, wildfires? Is there a way to somehow simulate it, somehow predict it, and then also find a way to slow things down, address the outcome better?
Now, the theme of World Economic Forum 2025 is about collaboration at the age of intelligence. Now, collaboration has been always the constant message of World Economic Forum for the past 5 decades. And of course, this year is no exception as well. So one of the panelists was talking about the erosion of trust that's happening around the globe. Let's listen to what Masood Ahmed, President, American Center for Global Development, had said about this.
I think one of the lasting consequences of the last 5 years is the erosion of trust between developing countries and rich countries, because rich countries have made a lot of promises which they haven't followed through on in terms of going from commitments to delivery. If we really want to solve common problems, and we can't deal with the problems we face without solving them together, we have to first start repairing this breach of trust.
That is about erosion of trust. Of course, in the same panel session as well, they talk about investment and also financing for developing nations.
I think now is the time where we have to relook into development.
Yeah.
And besides relook into development, what really matters? While they are talking into rewriting development, somehow or other, the question definitely about investment. So we have to listen to Lord Nicholas Stern, the analyst, very prominent analysts, in fact, during that particular rewriting development session in which WEF and Astro AWANI, as well as Lutfi Siddiqui from Bangladesh, in which he's also part of the special envoy to the president, to the chief advisor, Dr. Muhammad Yunus, on moving forward for Bangladesh. And of course, by looking into how we can actually moving from so-called stagnant middle income country and forward.
So we really do have to rethink policy, rethink the role of the state. And to conclude where Masood concluded, if we are able to get behind the investment, particularly in the developing world that we need, that new approach, that new path of development in our hands is enormously attractive. And it will be fast, it will be rapid development.
So I agree that we do need more funding, more concessional funding, better pricing of that funding, better terms of that funding. But I don't think it's either or. Money matters, but governance matters as well. And the risk pricing for these countries, we have as much of an obligation to get the story right and then sell the story right in order to affect the pricing of that. I don't think we should deflect from our need to make governance improvements. I look at Malaysia, for example. I mean, just in the last 12 months, amazing investments in data centers, semiconductors, that sort of stuff. So there are some really good stories where you can turn vicious cycles into virtuous cycles. I would hope that all of you would essentially act as reforms watch in countries like Nigeria and Bangladesh as well, so that you hold our feet to the fire, whoever is representing our countries at the next Davos. Make sure that we deliver reforms that are felt by investors, by people, by citizens at the retail level, because that really is as much of an imperative as is the investment imperative.
Youth is also one of the focus at the World Economic Forum. Professor Muhammad Yunus was quoted as saying that the youth currently, the youth now, is the most powerful youth ever in history because of the technological advancements that we've seen now. They are now not just the country's youth, but they're the global youth. The movement is so powerful that the world cannot ignore. Let's listen to what he has said.
Power comes to them not because they are super intelligent. They are the same kind of kids that we used to be. Power comes from the technology. That technology changed them. They are not Bangladeshi young people anymore. They are global young people. So that global young people, when they get connected on an issue, I don't think anybody can stop them. So Bangladesh is just a spark coming to that. So Bangladesh should be studied. You know what, which bothers me? All these things happening, we're reading in the newspaper, we talk a little bit, stop there. We're not studying what happened in Bangladesh. Universities should be rushing there. What happened to the most powerful government of 16 years? Couldn't stand for a few minutes when these young people just got together. They didn't have a political philosophy. You'll be asking, are they leftist? Are they Islamist? Are they terrorist? It doesn't come into any category. You don't have a category for them. You see everybody there. All the citizens, all the young people of Bangladesh got together.
Yeah, of course, at the end of the day, when it comes to new development, with technological advancement, it goes back on how we can strengthen talent. So youth, indeed important, but at the same time, moving forward from WEF 25, the takeaway point here is everything is new. There will be no surprises anymore. Why? Because AI comes into play. So those are the questions that I think all of us have to ponder, not just leaders and corporate leaders, and also businesses, but people, civil society at large. And that's all from us, from Oxford, to Decoding WEF 25 on Astro AWANI.
Hello and welcome to Niaga Spotlight with me, Tehmina Kaoosji. Niaga Spotlight goes through the week in economic analysis and future affairs. Today on Future Affairs, we discuss Integrated Water Resources Management, or IWRM. Well, firstly, to contextualize the urgency of IWRM in Malaysia, 2 days ago, the doomsday clock, which symbolizes how near humanity is to destruction, has been moved 1 second forward to 89 seconds to midnight, the closest it has ever been since its inception in 1947. Now, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, BAS, which sets the clock annually, stated that climate change is among key factors for this 1 second change, in addition to nuclear threats, potential misuses of advances in biology, and artificial intelligence. Additionally, the State of Global Water Resources report released by UNESCO in October 2024 highlights severe stress on global water supplies, with 5 consecutive years of below normal river flows and reservoir inflows. This shortage is affecting communities, agriculture, and ecosystems. With 3.6 billion people globally currently facing water shortages, projected to exceed 5 billion by 2050, the report underscores the urgent need for action to meet Sustainable Development Goal 6 on water and sanitation. Now, zooming right into localized issues, IWRM in Malaysia is facing significant challenges due to rising urbanization, climate change, as well as outdated infrastructure. As of 2024, the country's water demand is projected to increase by 3 to 5% annually, primarily driven by urban growth and agricultural needs. 60% of treated water is lost through leakages, and water pollution continues to affect key rivers, with only 53% of our rivers meeting acceptable water quality standards. Charles Santiago, chairperson with the National Water Services Commission, SPAN, joins me live now in the studios to discuss integrated water resources management via actionable strategies. Charles, a very good morning. Welcome to studios.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So, Charles, just to get started off, let's frame what we are going to be discussing, which is, of course, the neglect of water resource management and infrastructure maintenance in Malaysia, as well as some of the core areas which SPAN has been playing in advocating for stronger regulatory frameworks so that we can move forward with more positivity towards not just 2030, but eventually 2050.
I think let me begin by saying that the water sector is a very challenged sector at this time. And as you point out in the introduction, it is largely through climate change, where the levels of uncertainty needs to be factored in at every point. You will have so much of rain at some point, and then for the next 6 months, you'll have no water.
Exactly.
This is something that is not only experienced in other countries, but also in Malaysia, though. But coming back to the ecosystem in Malaysia, the way water is organized, the Suruhanjaya Perkhidmatan Air Negara, or the Water Services Commission of Malaysia, the function is to regulate all the licensees, that is throughout the country, throughout the Peninsular Malaysia.
Yes, Peninsula, that's right.
It doesn't include Sabah and Sarawak. So it's basically a peninsular affair. That's number one. Number two, but the actual management of water depends on the state. We can only regulate.
Correct.
Through a business plan and through other regulatory framework, but the actual management is done by the state. And the state is the one that determines, what do you call it, how it's organized and how much money they're going to invest in infrastructure and so on and so forth. So it is a state matter, though, and that disconnect has to be dealt with at some point soon. And that's number one. Number two, you also have other government agencies that are also involved in the water ecosystem, if you want. So you have the DOE, the Department of Environment.
That's right.
You have the what do you call the Badan Kawal Silihan Negeri. It means every state have their own regulator as well. That is the Badan Kawal Silihan Negeri. And then you also have the Jabatan Bekalan Air in the state itself. So you have JPS involved as well. So you have Jabatan Pengairan and Saliran also involved. So you have DOE, you have JPS, you have JBA, and local councils together with the state regulator as well, and the state water operator as well. So this is actually what makes up the water ecosystem. And that is why it's important that that all of the entire ecosystem works together, is well coordinated, so that people can get their water, industries can get their water, and our restaurants can have sufficient water, not only for today, but for the next 5 or 6 years, though. For the, as planning requires, and also for the long term. Now, there are many challenges to this. There are many challenges, and let me just quickly explain. One is the challenge of climate, the uncertainty of the climate. Now, this is very real. This is very real. We should keep in mind that 81% of our drinking water comes from rivers.
That's correct, which is why when, of course, any kind of river pollution incidents occur, that immediately leads to shutdowns of the potable water supplies.
Yes. So 81% comes from rivers, about 18%, 19% comes from dams, and the rest is underground water. But the reason why I say 81%, that is the most important, that's the most strategic resource, because it depends on the weather.
Very true.
If there's no rain, there is no water in the river. And if there's no water in the river, you and I will be challenged. Our industries will be challenged. So that is why we really have to start looking at the rivers very carefully. Today, our rivers have been highly compromised as a result of the massive pollution that affects the river, and actually it destroys the ecosystem. So when it destroys the ecosystem of the river, the climate change together with climate change, then the carrying capacity of the water carrying capacity begins to drop, begins to drop of the river itself. And also, our span studies are also showing that the yield from the river to the treatment plants are also dropping.
That's also of great concern, naturally.
Absolutely. So the weather triggers, the change in the weather patterns, the uncertainty of the weather triggers a whole variety of changes that we have to factor in. So that is why I think it is going forward, we need to put the rivers together with the management of water as one ecosystem. They cannot be separated into two anymore. This is what is happening in other countries as well. So we look at the rivers and we look at management of water on land and use and frame it as one ecosystem. This is the way that we need to go forward to manage the disconnect that we have now. That's number one. Number two, our operators, as I said, bulk of the bulk of management of water largely lies with the state. And the states have their own operators. In Selangor, we have IS Selangor. In Penang, you have PBA Pulau Pinang. In Kedah, you have SADA. So you have all of the operators. Now, some of the operators are okay, but the bulk of them have problems, and therefore they make losses. One of the reasons why they make losses is because the tariffs are very low.
Correct.
It has been consistently low for the longest period of time. Last year, the government made an effort to push the tariffs slightly up, but despite it increasing, there is not enough money for them to stay afloat. So therefore, the ability to repair infrastructure, the ability to, replace pipes, all becomes a problem because they don't have the funds. And when there's a disruption, money goes to solve that disruption. So therefore, the society has to start looking at water as something that belongs to them. Water is theirs. It belongs to the people, though, and therefore they need to support it. They need to support the local water operators, especially when it comes to consumption of water as well as paying for the water. I think this is quite important. And the other problem that's linked to lack of funds is the high levels of non-revenue water.
That's right. About 35% or so of water in the system is non-revenue water. So
yes. So the losses are quite high. 35. I think the average is 35 to 37 across the country. But there are some particular states which are quite high. It goes up to 60%. Now, what this means is for every $100, you're losing $60. And these are processed water.
And in addition to the fact that 60% of treated water is lost due to leakages.
That's what it is. That's what it is. So that means you are processing, 100 liters of water. 60 is going down.
That's right.
So when it goes down, it's lost. So that means you have lost
sunken costs, basically.
Yeah, you have lost 60 ringgit compared to the 100 ringgit. So you already have 40. So you need to reduce the NRW.
That's right.
So what we have done at SPAN, let me give you some numbers on this, though. Between 2018 and 2022,
right,
we have lost something like 8 billion ringgit worth of non-revenue water.
That's staggering. Not even a period of 5 years.
Yeah. So, and this is climbing, it's getting bigger and bigger. So therefore, what we have done is we have done two things. One, we have set up a joint committee between SPAN and also in one particular state, Perlis, Syarikat Air Perlis. So we just signed the agreement, and our technical team visited Perlis 2 times in order to structure out what we can do to help the local operator to enhance productivity, to enhance profitability, and then at the same time operational efficiency, and also to reduce NRW.
Right.
And from the feedback that we have got, we can actually reduce a good amount of NRW in the next year and a half if we follow the plan that has been worked out. And that can save Air Perlis something like 7 to 8 million ringgit. So we have changed the approach compared to before. Before, entire responsibility was given to the operator. Now we have a joint committee. And the joint committee, is more accountable. It's accountable to SPAN, to their own states, as well as to Petra, the ministry involved in managing water in the country. So in this way, we are trying to identify at the local level what
That's
exactly
right.
we can
More
do.
localized initiatives so that you can actually stop the domino. Right. So thank you very much for that really comprehensive overview, Charles. Now, speaking of the domino effect, now another mix that has been added into the overall ecosystem for water consumption of late, and specifically in the past 2.5 to 3 years, has been the huge rise in the number of data centers and hyperscale data centers, which have cropped up across Malaysia, given the fact that we are quite blessed with plenty of natural resources. But what are some of SPAN's concerns when it comes to effectively integrating water resource management, particularly for key states such as Selangor, as well as Johor, which has currently more than 50 data centers on the plans?
Yeah, I think one has to keep in mind data centers are important for the development of a digital economy.
For sure.
So, therefore, we have to recognize the importance of data centers, but we also have to recognize that it has to be sustainably managed, the data centers. And why should they be sustainably managed is because they are guzzlers of electricity, energy, and they're also guzzlers of water.
As the cooling agents.
Yeah. So you need water. The amount of water you need would depend on the amount of energy that is being required. So the issue of hyperscales that you are mentioning, hyperscales can be anywhere between 700 megawatts to 1,000 megawatts, which means that they will require something like 6 to 7 Olympic-sized swimming pool amounts of water on a daily basis. So if you have, there's a plan, I've read in the newspapers, there's a plan for in one area in Johor to have 3 or 4 hyperscales. And just by reading it, it tells you, hey, doesn't sound right. Because water has to go to households, water has to go towards local industries, to local restaurants, to local shops, local warungs, and so on and so forth.
Naturally, plus household usage.
Exactly, for households. So the question is, if there is a crisis, if there is a drought period for 6 months, all of this can happen. So therefore, we need to factor them as part of planning before you actually give approvals for these data centers. And we are starting, I must emphasize, in the most unsustainable way. We are using portable drinking water. In other countries, when it comes to data centers, the requirement is you have to use 50% rainwater harvesting and another 50% reclaimed water.
Right, which does not interfere at all with the potable.
Exactly. But we are starting with portable drinking water. So that's why it's important that before a development order is given at the local council, there must be clear stipulations that in 3 to 5 years, you need to transit from portable to reclaimed water as well as to rainwater harvesting.
And of course, the fact that raw water supply needs to be adequate before any more permits can be considered at all.
And you also can use stormwater approaches and so on and so forth.
Sure.
Now, the catch is here. You have to install rainwater harvesting as part of the building, as part of the construction of the building, not as an afterthought once the building is already up.
Sure.
You can't do that.
That's like working backwards, right?
Exactly. So when I spoke to some of the big players in rainwater harvesting, they are getting approaches from the data centers after halfway through the building construction. So they're saying this cannot work. It must start from day one, and therefore it must go hand in hand. But this is where the local councils have to advise data center companies, especially the all these developers who are developing these data centers, that they have to use rainwater harvesting together with reclaimed water. And I think they also have to ensure that, like what Selangor is doing, for example, zero discharge policy. So
that's a good start, at least.
Very good. So Selangor will bring it. I think this year they'll implement it. I think Johor also has to do it. So I think basically what we are looking at is we're looking at data centers developing in 2 water stress states. And I think given the importance of the industry, given the importance of data centers in a digital economy, we need to ensure that it is sustainable. It is sustainable. So this is where local councils, before the permits are given, have to ensure A, B, C is there. And I think the way to start it, you have to have an environmental impact assessment.
Absolutely.
And so a noise impact assessment. Because some of these are big, they make so much of noise. So when it's located near homes, near building complexes and so on, it will impact on other surrounding areas. So you need to go through that exercise. Although it is encouraged, but it's not mandated. So I think it's time to mandate it. It also needs to mandate it.
Exactly, and particularly with the revelations of DeepSeek AI, for example, perhaps we will be reviewing and revisiting the necessity for so very many data centers, especially hyperscale. So thanks for that, Charles. Now moving back into looking at some wider issues that are impacting the water ecosystem. Now we have urban water demand and increasing frequency of droughts, but at the same time, SPAN is also involved in addressing the challenges related to over-extraction of groundwater, because groundwater in key Malaysian states, that is not also the way to go when it comes to ensuring adequate potable water supply, right? What are the long-term risks that we face if this is overlooked and accelerated groundwater extraction does continue?
I think there's only one state that actually uses groundwater in a very big way. That's the state of Kelantan.
That's right.
And I think the state of Kelantan, together with the ministry, has to develop a plan. In order to ensure potable drinking water becomes the main form of water consumption as opposed to underground water. There are challenges to using underground water, partly because of the chemicals involved. Like, for example, in some parts of in Tamil Nadu, India, they use huge amounts of underground water. Now, what happens is seawater is now moving into those areas because they have not been they're not being used anymore. And after the tsunami that took place a couple of years ago, there's a trend in Tamil Nadu, for example, where seawater is now moving into
the aquifers,
which compromises aquifers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Compromises aquifers. So that means the water becomes polluted. And it's no longer safe for consumption. So I think it's time to transition away from depending on underground water or groundwater and depend more on potable drinking water.
And I would say also another ongoing climate impact challenge is the fact that our meteorological department surveys show that particularly in states using some groundwater such as Kelantan, even Kedah and Terengganu, droughts have also increased in frequency by up to about 40% in just the past few years. So again, it brings us back to the fact that it needs to be attended to quite immediately. Now, in your capacity as SPAN chairperson, Charles, you've also consistently highlighted the importance of sustainable water management. So what are some of the opportunities that exist in 2025 and hopefully can be set in place so that we are well placed moving into 2030?
I think water should be seen as a national security priority.
Absolutely.
It should be perceived as a national security priority, and every effort has to be made to ensure that there's water security at all times, and that our households, our factories, our industries, agriculture, and so on and so forth have sufficient water for the longest period of time. Now, this is a challenge, partly as we talked about, because of climate. And when climate comes, there's no control of this. Energy, you know how much of energy you have. But water, you can never say for certain, partly because the weather uncertainties.
True.
So therefore, we need to plan in such a way. And I think if you actually elevate water to the highest level, national security priority, then necessary resources will go to address water issues. So for example, we are talking to some of banks, for example, in order to support non-revenue water, to help solve the problem, to address the problem of non-revenue water.
At the root itself, yeah.
Yes. And there are also some discussions about, adding 3 cents or 2 cents towards our bills, so that money also can be used, water bills I mean here, that can also be used to support or reduce non-revenue water, but also to maintain the infrastructure that we need to maintain going forward, given the issues of climate. So we need, and for example, it's like this though. If you look around this building, everything this building has got water in it.
Absolutely.
Our clothes, for example, every jeans, it requires about 3,000 liters for every jeans, 3,000 over liters though. I have the number here. Let me get the number to you.
Absolutely.
It is 3,781 liters for your jeans.
One pair.
One pair of jeans. And then for every, coffee, every cup of coffee is 140 liters that we have. And every, the building, you need water for the building. So water is so important
and
to
so
our life, to our reproduction of society and so on. But where is water in terms of priority? At the lowest level. So we need to elevate it to the highest level and also get the necessary funds and support to ensure that water will last with us for the next 100 years, for example. That's the way we should approach it. We should say this is the national security priority, and I think this is something that we should do. And maybe we should impress our Prime Minister to consider water as a national security
priority, absolutely, especially given the fact that despite the challenges that we see on the flip side of continued intermittent flooding, that is also emblematic of the way in which water scarcity is set to become an issue in Malaysia by 2025, which is this year, since our actual water supply actually falls below the 1,000 cubic meters threshold.
Sure.
And according to, of course, the United Nations, this is a critical level. So moving on into trying to evaluate the entire discussion so far, and especially looking at access to clean water in areas which are outside of the urban sprawl. Let's look at rural areas and some of the challenges which have been ongoing and which you hope that SPAN's framework is going to help the state authorities address in the coming year.
Before answering the question, let me just backtrack, and I think it's something that we have to address though. This is the consumption of water on a daily basis. For example, today per capita consumption of water per Malaysian is 226 liters per person. 226.
That's significant, yes.
That's huge, and that is so unnecessary, right? What we need is only 160 liters per person, but we're consuming 100 more. So this is something that we have to address. So we need to ensure that we need to conserve.
A mindset shift, really.
So parents should be telling their children. Schools should be promoting the idea of water conservation. Factories should start recycling in the name of conservation, though. This is something that has to be done. In Spain, we have changed track a bit, though. Normally, you always speak to the parents to speak to their children, or you speak to the older community to speak to the younger ones. We have said that's a wrong strategy. Now we are saying, let the children speak to their parents, though. Let the children ask the parents.
A social control, right?
Yeah. So the child goes to the house and says, "Why are you wasting water? Why are you not recycling water at home? Why are you washing your car every day? Is there a necessity to wash your car every day? On top of that, car exposure to the rain." So I think when children start questioning, then the parents might change, though. The older people might change.
Fair enough.
So I think the strategy has to change.
Because you've got to try all approaches.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we have started a campaign now in Spain for the next 6 months, where we're going to go to schools and we're going to educate children to ask the question of how are we going to conserve water in the schools as well as at home, so that the message can be sent to parents, to their brothers, bigger brothers, older brothers, and so on, that water needs to be conserved. And we have to have this notion that water belongs to people, though, and therefore we need to conserve it as if it belongs to us. So when we have, we have a favorite pet, for example, we take care of the pet. We make sure it goes to the hospital. We go to, we
take care of all its needs.
When the cat or the dog is upset or the horse is sick, it's like almost we are sick, though. That's how we have to feel about water.
Water supplies.
That's how we have to look at water, because it belongs to us. You lose it, you don't get it anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah. So about those who do not get it, though, I'm coming back into the question I was referring to earlier, Charles. Basically, your SPAN report from 2021 is actually saying that about 30% of rural households in Malaysia are still facing challenges and unreliable access to clean water. So some of SPAN's thoughts moving forward for the year ahead.
I think a most part of that number actually could be Sabah and Sarawak. I think Peninsular Malaysia, we have 99% or 98%
penetration,
access to water, and specific to water, maybe in the case of rural areas, is the Ministry of Rural Development. It comes under them.
That's right.
It doesn't really come under SPAN's oversight. Our oversight is basically on states and not on ministries. So therefore, they too have their own water programs as well. So maybe it's time need to look at that more carefully.
Absolutely. And now, when SPAN's role in regulating water privatization has also come under challenge in recent years, particularly in light of your concerns about detrimental effects of privatized water services on affordability as well as accessibility for low-income Malaysians. So what could perhaps be the solution as we move forward over the next 5 to 10 years with those slight increases to up to 10 to 15%, but ensuring access for our especially B40 communities?
Malaysia's water, by and large, is not privatized. There's only one state that privatizes it, which is actually Johor. So there is a contract between the state of Johor and Renhill. So that is the only one that's privatized. The other one is corporatized. That's in Penang. But besides that, the remaining states, they come under the state, their own states. So they are publicly owned as such. But they are very sensitive to price increases. All the states are very sensitive to price increases, especially involving water, because it is a human right. So therefore, we have to ensure water in an affordable way for everybody. At the same time, to ensure that the operators are efficient and sustainable, financially sustainable as well. At this time, most of the operators are not financially sustainable.
So that is the key and the be and the end all. Charles, thank you so much for your insights in so far, and I think it's been an absolutely insightful session on integrated water resource management. Well, that's all we have time today on Niaga Spotlight, featuring Charles Santiago, Chairperson for the National Water Commission Association. We will join you again next week on Friday. I'm signing off now. Tehmina Kaoosji. We'll see you again next week with more economic analysis and insights.
Peserta berjaya ke peringkat seterusnya.